Hi, welcome back, guys. This is your friend, the Mama Fanfics, back with amazing fanfiction. This series of what if Deku inherited gamma rays and became Hulk. It began like any other day. Hisashi had brought his son to the labs to cheer him up. His pride and joy, little Izuku. His quirk exam had not gone great. It had not gone terrible, that is to say, it was not like he was quirkless. The truth of the exam was that he did have a quirk, but the test was inconclusive as to what that quirk was. His body seemed able to draw in some energy. What that energy was, or to what end, was unknown. More testing would be required, as it was believed that with the seemingly slow rate at which he collected whatever energy he was collecting, his quirk would not be one that would allow him to pursue his and every other 4-year-old's dream of heroics. The news had been devastating. His wonderful wife Inko had called him right away, and he made arrangements to be there to comfort his little boy. It had been a long night, but in the end, though Izuku was still sad, he knew his parents loved him and would be there for him. The next day at school, he came home upset because the other kids were making fun of him, and Kachin, his first friend, didn't want to be friends with him anymore because he was a Deku. Inko was furious and had called Kachin's mother and the school for allowing what amounted to quirk discrimination to take place under their nose. She was not about to let that stand. Hisashi just got out of her way. If anyone saw her, they would have assumed she had the fire quirk and not him. He knew better than to get in her way regarding Izuku. They had wanted to have more children, but Izuku's conception, gestation, and birth had almost seen both of them taken into the afterlife. The next time, the doctors were sure that it would. So they made the only decision they could. She had a complete hysterectomy, and he got a vasectomy. He didn't want any more children if it wasn't with her. Inko was the love of his life. So Hisashi got the security clearance to bring his son to work and show him around the labs. His reasoning was to show his son that you could still do great things in this world, even without a powerful quirk. Hisashi could breathe fire, but that had nothing to do with his job. He was a scientist who was researching the phenomena of dark lightning, otherwise known as terrestrial gamma ray flash, or TGF. Terrestrial gamma ray flashes, TGFs, are sudden bursts of gamma rays that occur in Earth's atmosphere. These flashes can last only milliseconds and have energies of up to 20 million electron volts, or 20 megavolts. TGFs are believed to be caused by strong electric fields produced inside or above thunderstorms. Scientists have also found that TGFs produce energetic electrons and positrons. Hisashi had devoted his life to this field of study, the study of this event that occurred during lightning storms. Terrestrial gamma ray flashes pose a challenge to current theories of lightning, especially with the discovery of the clear signatures of antimatter produced in lightning. The explosion of gamma rays was directed outwards above the planet into space. But what if it could be harnessed? Gamma rays were already being used in sterilization processes and could even treat some sicknesses. If they could solve the puzzle of dark lightning, would that lead them to how antimatter was created in a lightning bolt? What was the relationship between the two? It had been long believed that its penetration power and impossibility to collimate it. The energy conversion efficiency had always been low, and cells were unstable. That was until Hisashi had found a way to keep the gamma rays from penetrating containment, and his partner, Dr. Samuel Stearns, had created a way to collect and convert the gamma rays into a stable form. Hisashi wasn't supposed to come to work today. Most of the staff was off because it was the start of Golden Week. Everyone had worked hard, and this was their reward. Stable, portable gamma generators have been created. As Hisashi walked down the nearly empty corridors, Izuku listened to his dad talk about all the different things that went on at the lab. And then he took his boy into the lab where he worked every day. The way that his father talked with such passion and conviction resonated deep inside Izuku. A few days ago, it seemed like his world was going to explode. Now, he knew he could still do something extraordinary for the world. Maybe he could build things to help heroes, or better yet, to help everyone. A whole different world was being opened to him. A new universe of possibilities was being laid before him. Hisashi led him into the testing lab and set up a station so Izuku could see actual gamma rays. Izuku marveled at all the strange and wondrous devices around him, his little mind making up extravagant things that the machines did. Hisashi smiled at the look of wonder on his son's face. It seemed like this little trip would be a success, that he could inspire his son to walk a different path. Don't touch anything. I will be right back. I will get a little sample so you can see real dark lightning. Okay, Daddy. Izuku promptly stuck his hands in his pocket to avoid temptation. He learned that lesson at the crystal store with his mom last year. Just thinking of that made his bottom hurt. Hisashi entered the storage vault, entered his code, and opened the first door. He let it shut as he proceeded to the inner door. He froze when that one unlocked, and the lights automatically came on. There should be 20 generators and over 100 storage containers in here. They were missing. Panic immediately ran through him. He turned, ready to hit the alarm on the wall, only to see it gone, wires hanging from where it once was. Quickly, he turned to exit the room. As the outer door opened, he heard his son. He went to get the dark lightning for me to see. That is so cool, Izuku. He heard the voice of his friend, Izuku's godfather, his partner Samuel Stearns. Why do those men have guns? Guns are illegal. Oh, those aren't real guns. They shoot paintballs. We will play paintball later. But I forgot my paintball gun in the lab, so I had to come get it. Hisashi paused and started to take in some rabid breaths, getting his quirk as warmed up as possible. Sam didn't play paintball. Doing his best to control the tone of his voice. Sam, is that you? He called as he stepped out. Sure enough, it was Sam, kneeling face to face with Izuku, and he wasn't alone. 6 other people were in the room, dressed in black paramilitary attire, their faces covered and weapons ready. He watched as Sam stood up, placing a hand on Izuku's shoulder and putting the boy between them. What are you doing here, Hisashi? Sam asked as he pulled a pistol from his pocket. Oh, I just wanted to bring Izuku by the lab. He had been having a rough week, so I wanted to show him that there were other things he could do besides heroics. Hisashi stepped out fully, his hands at his sides, palms out, showing he was unarmed. Come here, Izuku. Izuku went to move, but Sam's hand on his shoulder stopped him. Let my godson stay here for a minute. You should have stood home. I can see that. Hisashi looked around the room frantically. He needed to get Izuku somewhere safe. What are you doing, Samuel? You see, my paintball friends made me an offer, and I said yes. You see, the thing about gamma, as you know, can penetrate the human body very well. It penetrates a lot of things very well. And if you concentrate the burst down through the accelerator collection coil, it will penetrate almost anything or anyone on the planet. He watched as Sam's face contorted into a look of near madness. This wasn't the man-friend he had known all these years. There are some dangerous people out there, Hisashi, who may need to be stopped. People whose quirks make that nearly impossible. But that ends. Society needs order. It needs balance. Right now, it isn't. There are those at the top and everyone else. Hisashi's mind was racing, trying to figure something. Anything that he could do. Please, Sam, not. Hisashi looked at Izuku, who was growing more scared by the moment. I would ask you to come with me, but I know you won't. Sam raised the gun behind Izuku's head. But I am not a monster. You will get in the vault, and I will seal you in. Izuku is going to come on a little ride with me. Hisashi went to say something, but the sound of the hammer on the gun being pulled back made him stop. Once I get to a stop, I will release him to the police, and they will call Inko so she can come get him. I am sure they will look for you at that point, and with some luck, they will find you before you run out of air. If I see any bit of green fire, then this goes very fucking different. Don't say a fucking word, just nod your head if you understand. Hisashi nodded his head, as he opened the vault and stepped inside. Izuku was trembling in fear when the door closed, and he started to cry. "Are we going to let that brat and his father live?" the largest of the soldiers asked. "Yes, I am," Samuel responded. He turned Izuku to face him. "Now, Izuku, if you don't stop crying, I am going to get mad. And if I get mad, then some bad things might happen to you, your daddy, and your mommy. I don't want to be a monster, Izuku, but I can be if you make me." Izuku didn't understand. He just wanted his dad to go home. But in the movies, he just had to be good until the hero came to save him. Izuku wiped his tears and nodded, stifling his crying. "Yes, sir," he whispered. "See? Problem solved. Now, finish getting everything loaded, disable the lock on the vault, and fucking move." He took Izuku's hand a little rough and started to pull him along. Once they left the room, the large man turned to one of his associates. "Wait 2 minutes. Open that door and shoot that motherfucker in the face." Izuku was led out to another part of the labs that he had never seen before. His uncle told him to climb in the back of a truck that had a metal top over the back. When he climbed in, he saw a bunch of boxes lining the walls, all strapped down. At the back of the truck, up against the cab, there were 2 seats. A different person took his hand gently and led him to the seat. A woman's voice told him, "You just need to sit here and don't cause any trouble, okay? Just be good. I promise I will get you home safe. Can you do that, Izuku?" Her voice was gentle and reaffirming, making him feel she would protect him. "Was it your daddy that brought you here?" Izuku could only nod as he held back the tears, thinking about his dad. "Okay, where is your daddy?" "He is in the lab, in the room with lightning," Izuku said as she strapped him in nice and secure. He saw a bit of her hair poking out from under her helmet. It was a pretty purple and bluish color. "Your hair is beautiful," he whispered, grasping at anything to no cry. "Thank you. Now stay in that seat and don't move, okay? Do everything I tell you because we go beyond." She turned and walked from him. His eyes lit up. Every kid knew that phrase. "Plus ultra," he whispered. "Sir, we have a situation," she called into her comms. "Hisashi." He had to hope what Samuel said was true, but he was smart enough not to trust it, or that those working with Samuel would honor his former friend's words. When the door opened, he had at least part of the answer. Hisashi was no trained fighter, a pro hero, or anything of that nature. He was in great shape because his wife liked his muscles. He was strong, and his quirk was serviceable for lighting a fire or keeping himself warm. Fighting not so much, but this time wasn't about him. His son was in danger, and he was going to do everything he could to try and save his little boy. When he first registered his quirk as a kid, he called it Dragon Fire Breath. Visions of greatness danced through his head like all kids, but that was not to be. Today, though, when the door opened, fueled by adrenaline, fear for his son, and the will to live, he would live up to that name. So, if he failed, he could hold his head high when his wife and son meet him in the afterlife. Hopefully, many years later. Rosho. He walked over to the vault and typed in the code. His weapon was ready. He didn't know what part of the vault the future dead person was. He didn't know if he was in the antechamber or the actual vault. Not that it mattered. What was one scientist going to do to him? They probably had some measly quirk that couldn't have done any real damage. When the door opened, the last thing that ran through Rosho's mind was, "What is that green light?" Hisashi. If the man coming to kill him screamed, Hisashi didn't hear it over the roar of the fire pouring from him. But without a doubt, the man was dead. What fell to the ground were the metal plates of his body armor. As they hit the ground, they splattered in a molten mess. He stumbled forward, holding his throat. It hurt, but he couldn't stop. He ran over to the computer, could log in, and sent the distress signal to the Japanese Defense Force and General Thunderbolt. Samuel. Samuel sat in the back of an SUV as the convoy moved out. Out the side mirror, as the door to the loading dock was thrown open, and out burst Hasashi. "Son of a bitch," he bellowed as he watched the man run off to the side where he knew there was a maintenance truck. "Now we have to kill him and the damn kid. How the fuck did he get out?" "Radio," he yelled to the man in the passenger seat. "Samson, the good doctor is loose. See to him and kill the kid." "With pleasure," the voice rang back. Samuel sat back as he heard, "Delilah, kill the kid." "Yes, sir," a woman's voice answered. "I need to remember to send flowers to their funeral," Samuel thought. "Delilah." She removed her helmet and ran her fingers through her purple and indigo hair. When she reached the long strand's end, the kid noticed she had twirled it around her finger. Once it was nice and tight, she ripped it. It morphed into a bullet as she walked back toward the kid. "Listen, Izuku, it will get loud. I need you to close your eyes and cover your ears for me, okay?" She couldn't help but smile as the kid nodded his head, shut his eyes tight, and covered his ears. "Overwatch, I need that backup ASAP. My cover has been compromised." Her tone was not one of panic, but very matter-of-factual. She walked to the back of the truck and knelt as her arm morphed into a rifle. She chambered the round of ammunition she had just made. The driver of the trailing vehicle's eyes widened as he saw the weapon being aimed at him. And that was the last thing he saw. Lady Nagant didn't miss at this range. With the first shot of fire, all hell began to break loose on the transport. The lead truck suddenly saw a woman step out onto the road. She was tall, 6'3", and with a very waifish appearance. Her long blue hair hung matted down past her knees, and her eyes were a dull blue, a nearly lifeless look on her face. She wore tight-fitting blue jeans and a bulky beige turtleneck sweater. A cigarette hung from her mouth as the lead SUV increased speed. She sighed, taking a long drag off her cigarette. She extended her hand lackadaisically towards the vehicle, palm out. When the vehicle impacted, it suddenly and violently stopped at her hand, and the passengers were violently ejected past her onto the road. The vehicle had just come to a stop. The woman turned, the smoke exhaling from her lungs as they rocketed towards them. Samuel's driver could swerve past the woman as they speed away. "Don't stop. We have a generator and 2 storage tanks. Fuck the rest, that is enough to start." "But sir," the passenger protested. Samuel rolled his eyes, pulled his gun, placed it at the base of the man's neck, and pulled the trigger. The man's throat exploded outward in a bloody mess. The sound was deafening in the confined space. "Damn, that was loud. Holy shit. Now don't stop." "Izuku." The truck carrying Izuku violently jerked to the side and then back, jostling him about. Thankfully, he was secured in his seat. He opened his eyes, and the side of the transport truck crashed inward as a well-built man about 5'9" came barreling into the truck, causing it to lurch to the side again, sending the nice lady toppling to the side as she spun and bringing her weapon to bear. The man was wearing black military clothes like everyone else, but unlike them, his face was uncovered. The sides of his face were covered in jagged scars, and there was one over his right eye. That eye was a milky white, while his other was normal. The scar over his eye started at his chin and ran up his face diagonally, crossing over his eye and wrapping over his head. Lady Nagant fired as the scars on the man's face burst open, and metal shards came flying out, deflecting her shot, which ricocheted around the inside of the truck. "Jesus, they keep getting younger," the man spat out as the shards flew around the room and flew at the hero. She dodged to the side, and another shot rang out. This time, the man was hit square in the chest. His eye rolled back into his head. Izuku shut his tight, and Lady Nagant cautiously approached the downed opponent. The scar on the man's face exploded out as more metal came flying towards her. She dived to the side as they ripped up and out of the truck. She saw the man keep up, his face a crimson mask, a bloody snarl as he launched his attack at her. Nagant got her arm up to block the first hit, and her arm morphed back into an arm from a gun. Her kicking his arm back met his second attack, and then she landed a spinning backhand that sent him sprawling. He laughed as he dived for cover, and the metal shards flew past her. She managed to dodge most of them, but not all, as several cuts opened on her left side. She drew a sidearm and was about to fire, barely missing the man's head. She heard him growl as the shards were sent flying at her again. She was about to dodge when she saw some flying toward a helpless little boy strapped to a seat. His eyes shut as tight as possible. Gritting her teeth, she dived and covered the boy as her body armor absorbed some of the blows. She turned and fired again, this time striking her opponent in the shoulder and chest. She had hoped to strike his heart. Even then, she wasn't sure that would kill him. As he fell back, the scar across his face exploded as more metal fragments fired out, up and through the roof. She watched as they came flying around down towards the truck. She ripped out a piece of hair as her arm transformed back into a rifle. He was glaring at her as all the pieces of shrapnel were descending on her and the boy. She was as calm as she pulled the trigger. She didn't miss as the man's head painted the scenery behind him. The shrapnel warbled. She covered the boy the best she could as the metal fragment tore through the top and bottom of the truck. It jerked to the left and then back but stood on the road. She didn't scream as a piece tore straight through her calf. Something large and heavy landed on the back of the truck. She turned around, and for the first time in her life, she thought she was hallucinating. Standing there was what could only be described as a homunculus. This grotesquely stitched together monstrosity had a bipedal shape. A putrid and rotting smell filled the back of the truck as two more slithered out of these black ink puddles. From the outside, she heard the most blood-curdling screams as she felt something crash into the front of the truck, and the vehicle began to swerve back and forth. "Izuku, I need you to unbuckle. We must get away right now." She didn't look back as she heard him begin to move. The giant creature went to come forward when an elastic arm snatched it, and one of the smaller ones around the waist yanked them out and sent them tumbling. "Nagant, get the hell out of there." A familiar voice yelled over her comms. "Working on it, Morph," she responded as the remaining one dodged the grab and raced towards her. She met it halfway as she slid under its disgusting gnarled arm with razors sticking out of it. She took its legs out, sending it crashing face first. She pulled her sidearm again and put 2 rounds in the back of the thing's head. She saw a swarm of these things overtaking the other vehicles, driving them off the road in a fiery wreck. The disturbing part was she saw the soldiers being yanked from the vehicles and tossed into the sky. She looked, and above them was a towering man over 7 feet tall with a muscular build to rival All Might. Dressed in an exquisite black with a silver pinstriped suit, his white hair fluttered in the wind as his red eyes drifted over the chaos below. "Smoke, we need evac now. Silence, Smoke." "He is dead," the wayfish woman responded. "That man killed him, Nagant." "Momentum. Get out now. Secondary protocol is in effect," Momentum responded. Nagant spun to see Izuku getting unbuckled. She screamed his name, reaching out her hand, as out of the corner of her eye, she saw 2 of the creatures come slithering out and tackle her out the back of the truck. She watched in horror as the little boy registered what happened, his whole body lurch as the truck came to a sudden stop. She saw Momentum standing at the front as it flipped into the air. Morph yanked her free of the creatures and back into the tree line. She saw the detonator in his hand. She screamed desperately as he pushed the button. The area went silent as the explosion ripped through it. They tumbled to the ground. Samuel saw the truck explode into the air and ducked down in the seat. The second explosion sent them flying as the first explosion rocked the SUV. Hasashi was racing after the convoy when everything went wild, the homunculus dropping out of the sky. Another group was attacking the soldiers. He thought he was going to catch up when something landed on the front of the little pickup, driving the engine out of the machine and causing it to come to a sudden and violent stop. He thanked the airbag, the protective foam, and the seatbelt. He felt himself yanked free and thrown across the road. He tumbled, his vision blurred, and he saw one of the soldiers walking towards him. "Where is Rosho? Don't tell me you killed him. If he is alive, then I may break your legs," the man bellowed. Hisashi sat up, spitting out some blood. "If you mean that pathetic piece of shit you left behind to kill me, you can pick him up. You may need a dust buster." "You killed my little brother," the man bellowed. "I will break you." The man ran at Hisashi, his arms turning into scythes as he charged. Hisashi waited for him to strike blindly at the last second. He rolled out of the way and stumbled to his feet. He primed his quirk as the man attacked blindly again. Hisashi threw his jacket at the man, which he cut in two. A wild swing caught the edge of Hisashi's gut, slicing his shirt and leaving a stinging, shallow cut on his abdomen. Hisashi slipped to the left, ducked quickly, and spun to his right as he was clipped on the arm. He turned and was kicked in the gut, sending him sprawling. He narrowly rolled out of the way of a killing swipe. He barely made it to his knees as the man charged once again. Hisashi took a deep breath and let loose his fire. It melted the pavement and fried off the man's legs below the knee. Hisashi turned his head from the gruesome sight as the man's face came in contact with the melted asphalt. He got to his feet and started to run after the convoy in desperation. He saw the truck take flight and explode. He stumbled but kept running, and then he saw it. The truck was in the air when it exploded. As it flipped up, he saw the energy containers for the gamma. He saw the container breaking open and the blackish-green light as they started to explode. The explosion threw him back. He thought he was dead for sure, seeing all that gamma about to flood everywhere. He dived off the road into a ditch, hoping for some cover. He could see the light expand, but suddenly, it all contracted again, and everything exploded around him for the third time. Everything went silent. Nagant thought she had gone deaf. Everything around her was silence. She rolled free from Morph and scrambled back towards the road. She screamed for the boy. All for One shook his head. The explosion had deafened him. He paused, activating his healing quirks. When the sound didn't return, he was puzzled. Samuel was trapped in the crumpled SUV, his mind fading in and out. He didn't know the vehicle was slowly being filled with gamma radiation. The last thing he heard before he lost consciousness was what could only be described as a roar. The monster. It was silent all over the area. And then something called out, screamed, and roared. It could have been a dragon's roar. Maybe if they were in the olden times or a fantasy world, it would have been believed as so. But what it did do was strike fear into all that heard it that day. All the homunculi looked up to their master, and with a wave of his hand, they all raced towards the sound. All for One stood there trying to understand what had just happened. Was there an unknown beast somewhere, or had his forces overlooked something? Nagant returned to the road. Frantically, she looked for some sign of the little boy. The wreckage around her gave her little hope, but quirks were strange. Maybe he had a quirk that would have saved him. She pleaded with anyone who may have been listening for him to have a quirk that would have kept him. Hisashi opened his eyes at the roar. He was alive. He stumbled to the road and ran towards the convoy to find his son. He needed to find him. All for One saw the signs of his homunculi engaging in battle, his monsters doing his bidding. Then he saw them flying out from the trees as the sounds of some battle intensified. He saw pieces of them being tossed this way and that. Their black and blood painted the very forest, the sounds of their destruction reverberating back to him. Nagant froze at the sounds of death from inside the forest. She saw one of the large homunculi come barreling out of the forest. It had not been sent of its own free will, and its head was missing. It lay on the road, its black blood spurting out. All for One was curious, and he floated down to the ground. His homunculi were not unbeatable. They were simple mindless brutes, but he had sent over 20 of them into the woods. The ground shook some as something emerged from the tree line. Nagant had locked and loaded, and was about to fire on the floating man, when that homunculi came barreling out of the forest, missing its head. She watched as the mystery man looked down at the thing and looked curious. Then she saw something move at the tree line. Hisashi came down the road. Seeing the wreckage of the lifeless bodies, the woman with an arm for a rifle and the man in the suit. Their focus was on the tree line. He looked desperately for any sign of his son. She outstepped a behemoth about 8 feet tall, green-skinned, muscular to an obscene level, with an almost ape-like physique. It stomped forward towards All for One, who grinned at the monster. "Now, where did you come from, my green friend? And what quirk do you have for me? The army I could create." He stared at the monster as he walked forward. The beast was slightly taller than him, surprisingly broader than him. "Now, come give me your secrets." The monster stepped forward and backhanded the man in the suit, sending him stumbling back. The man showed fear. That shouldn't be possible. Before he could say anything else, the monster came at him again. This time, he dodged past the clumsy attack. He sneered and delivered a punch that sent shockwaves reverberating around them. All for One's eyes widened when the monster grabbed him by the head and began to slam him back and forth on the pavement. He grabbed the hand not for release, activating his quirk. He was ready to take the power of this monster, but he couldn't touch it. His shock caused him to falter. Partially embedded in the ground, the monster began to stomp on him like a bug, and blood flew from the villain's mouth. Activating all the strength quirks, he caught the monster's foot, but was losing the test of strength. Inconceivable. He managed to roll the creature's foot to the side. He went to float up only to be snatched by the throat. He tried to speak, but the thing roared in his face. Its giant fist reared back and punched the villain into the forest, leaving a path of devastation behind. All for One came to a rest in a crater. He was severely injured and incredibly mad, and he struggled to his feet. He heard the approach of helicopters, not wanting to be seen. He grit his teeth and was swallowed by a black ooze, a silent vow of revenge on his lips. Nagant saw the monster turn towards her, a sneer on its face. As it went to move towards her, she aimed, but she saw it pause. It looked at her like it knew her. She saw its stance soften. She lowered her arm and began to approach, her other hand extended to touch the monster. General Thunderbolt. As they came over the horizon, they saw this green monster covered in some black liquid heading towards what appeared to be some soldier. He was about to give the command to open fire on both when the radio call came in of friendlies in the area, HSC agents. He growled as he mashed down on his cigar. Today had already been bad. Now, add HSC agents to his base. He was not happy. They had almost been knocked out of the air by the explosion a little earlier. He shook his head. At least it was Hero Safety Commission, and not some regular spandex wearing high school graduates with no real training. He threw open the door to the chopper and stepped out, giving the command to only fire on his signal. A lightning bolt boomed in his hand as he used it to slide down to the ground safely. The woman turned and looked at him, recognizing that the beast snarled at him. "Name," he ordered of the woman. "Lady Nagant of the HSC, sir." She responded, still watching the monster. "We will discuss what you are doing on my base later." "Is this thing one of yours?" He looked over the monster. It seemed barely intelligent. "No, sir, it just showed up. There was a villain attack. They had some homunculi with them, and this thing beat them all, sir, and their controller. Some guy in a suit with white hair and red eyes." The general raised an eyebrow at the description. "You monster," he pointed at the beast. "Surrender peacefully, or I will have to take you down." He pointed at the giant green monster, a lightning bolt forming in his hand. "Now get on your knees." The monster immediately began to feel uneasy when this loud man showed up. Then, it was pointing at him and saying things. The monster wanted nothing to do with this. It just wanted some peace. It snorted at the loud man and turned away. "I said on your knees," Thunderbolt thundered. "General, no." Nagant tried to warn him, but she was too late. The lightning bolt released from the hold the general had on it and crashed into the back of the monster, who turned around, its face contorting from annoyance to rage. The general's eyes widened slightly. He bit down on his cigar. "Tough son of a bitch, aren't you?" The green monster roared as the general raised his hand to the sky. It immediately darkened as 5 thunderbolts came crashing down onto the monster. Thunderbolt sneered. The stupid beast just needed to be brought to heel. He smirked as the thing he thought cried out in pain. Nagant was forced to jump back for his safety. Hisashi came running up as the lightning struck the monster, and then he and Nagant heard the roar again. "It is coming from the monster." Thunderbolt thought the beast would drop to its knees, but instead, it stomped the ground, causing it to shake, throwing the general off balance and making the attack falter. It then roared in rage at the loud man. The general raised both hands to strike again, but didn't get a chance as the monster backhanded him away, sending him crashing through trees in the forest. The gunship opened fire. Nagant watched as the bullets just thudded against the monster. It raised its hand to block its face its massive legs tensed, and it suddenly leaped at the gunship. They tried to move out of the way, but it smashed through their tail, sending it spiraling towards the ground. Nagant saw 8 more gunships coming into range and opening fire where the monster had landed in the forest. Hisashi just put it out of his mind and ran forward, screaming for Izuku. The purple-haired woman turned at his voice. "Dr. Midoriya, we have to get you out here," she said as she ran towards him. "I can't, my son," he protested. Hope, however faint, sprang forward in her heart. "What kind of quirk does your son have?" "A collection quirk it absorbs. We have no idea. Is very weak." "Why?" he asked quickly. "Dr. Midoriya, your son is dead. He was in the back of the truck that blew up." The words were bitter in Nagant's mouth and burned like acid when she spoke them. Her heart ached as the hope died. Hisashi stared at her in disbelief. The truck that exploded, the gamma explosion, Izuku was in that. "No," he muttered. He looked around and screamed for his son, tears streaking down his face. He just screamed and screamed. Nagant lifted him to his feet as her heart broke at the sheer pain in the man's voice, at the little voice that had responded to her. Plus Ultra. Morph came running out to help her with the broken man as Momentum came up in a car. Over the tree line, they saw the monster springing out of the forest, swatting the gunships out of the air. Nagant paused when the thing took a whole missile barrage, but that roar told her it was still moving. A tree flew out of the forest like a spear, and the helicopter went down. They forced Hisashi into the car as he clawed to get past them, calling for his son, begging for him. As the door closed, the last helicopter crashed to the ground, and the monster's roar was almost like a response to the poor doctor's desperate plea. As they sped to safety, Nagant saw the monster come leaping out of the trees. She marveled at how far it flew away. 2 leaps, and it was already out of sight. They hadn't gotten far when they encountered the Japanese Defense Force, or the JDF. They were stopped. They quickly showed their identification and relayed what had happened to the downed gunships, the general, and the monster. They were told to move out of the area and that the doctor would be left to them for now. The JDF moved in to secure the area. Hisashi was just curled into a ball on the back seat, rocking back and forth, whispering his son's name like a prayer. If he said it enough. "Izuku." He awoke shivering. He immediately sat up and looked around. He was in a cave. He didn't remember much, only seeing the purple-haired hero getting yanked out of the truck. Everything else was hard to remember. He was scared and angry. He thought he saw the hero again, but through a thick haze. He wasn't sure. Then, just loud and furious was the only thing running through his head. He looked around and had no clothes on except his All Might underwear. He didn't know how he got there or where he was. Like all 4-year-olds, he began to cry, calling for his mommy and daddy. He didn't know how long he cried, but soon, he had to go to the bathroom. Reluctantly, he made his way out of the cave. There were trees all around, but the forest was strangely quiet. A morning fog had not lifted yet, adding to the place's mystique. He went behind a tree and relieved himself, looking this way and that. He didn't know what to do. He was cold, wet, and hungry. He couldn't survive. He didn't know how to hunt or what to eat or anything. He went fishing once with his dad and grandfather, but they just gave him a fishing pole to hold. All he could remember was that he could not get lost by walking in a straight line. He looked at the rising sun, bit his lip, and started to walk as carefully as he could. After stepping on some sharp rocks and scraping himself on some bushes, it overwhelmed him again, and he started crying. As his crying calmed, he heard a voice. "You see, Mother, the forest is haunted." As the book said, you could hear the crying of the lost souls in the morning fog. A little girl's voice rang out. "That is most certainly an odd phenomenon. I wonder if a quirk is involved," a woman's voice responded. That is very interesting cough. Perhaps we should return to the campsite and maybe explore more when there isn't much fog or something," a man said. "But Father, we have heard the crying. We must see if we can find the source. We may even see a ghost." "Is that not great?" the little girl said. "I must agree with her, darling. Imagine if we could prove the existence of the spirit world. I would be most interesting," the mother said. Izuku's voice was raw from his crying. He called out weakly, "Help! Help me! Mother, it is trying to lure us closer. We must be on guard," the little girl said. "Or we can come back later," the man said with a hint of panic. "Piss posh Shinobu, this is a chance of a lifetime," the woman said, her voice still and calm. "Yes, Father, just think of the opportunity," the little girl's voice rang out, calm like the mother, but with a tinge of excitement to it. Ryuko, Shinobu pleaded. Izuku got to his feet and began to stumble toward the voices coming to him out of the fog. "Help," he cried, the tears coming to him again. "Is it getting closer?" Shinobu said, his voice wavering. "Yes, let us help your lost spirit come to us," Ryuko called. "Yes, reveal thyself to us, so we may help you find peace," Emiko said. "Help, please help me." Izuku desperately tried to head to the voices crashing through the underbrush like an animal. The sounds of something coming towards them terrified Shinobu. To his dismay, it seemed to delight his wife and daughter. Ryuko was the image of her mother with pale gray hair and blue eyes, who spoke in a similar restrained tone and shared a love of all things spooky and mysterious. That was how he found himself on a camping trip for Golden Week. The two most influential women in his life had seen a program about the legends of the forest surrounding Mt. Yakama, and he mentioned camping. Now, a ghost was crashing through the forest to drag them to who knows where. But Ryuko and Emiko were excited, cameras at the ready. He took a deep breath and stepped in front of his girls. His quirk of levitation would allow him to float, but it was unsuitable for fighting. But he was the man Gulp, and he had to do something. Emiko did notice her husband taking a defensive position in front of them. It was one of the most attractive things she had seen him do recently. She would have to reward him for his bravery. It was getting closer to the sounds of the forest and the crying for help. The girls eagerly answered, drawing it closer, when suddenly something came crashing out just feet before them. Shinobu yelled and leaped on the ghost. He was on the shorter side, being 5'5", and his wife stood a solid 6 ft, making them an odd pairing. He was a little heavy, but she preferred him that way, and he loved her so much he couldn't say no. But today, he would be a lion and go down in history as the man who wrestled a nearly naked dirty young boy to the ground who was crying. Quickly, Shinobu scrambled to his feet, but the ghost was quick and latched onto his leg. Please help," it rasped. Shinobu tried to shake the boy free, but it did not avail. Izuku was scared and desperate. This was his 8 seconds. Emiko ran forward to stabilize her husband before he toppled over. Ryuko froze as her mind processed what was unveiled before her. She reached out with her quirk, got a hold of the little boy, and pulled him away towards her. Izuku shrieked in terror at what he thought was his chance for salvation being taken away from him. When two slender arms touched his cheeks, their eyes locked, and her beautiful blue eyes bored deep into his soul. "It will be okay. Though you are not a ghost, we will see you are safe." He froze. Part of him wanted to cry and scream, but something deep inside wanted to rage and scream. Ryuko saw myriad emotions she didn't understand run through her ghost's eyes. In the end, she saw something in his eyes. As that emotion, his eyes glowed with an emerald fire, she pulled his dirty face closer. "It is okay," she reiterated. "I promise my ghost, it will be okay." Her father was about to run in, but his wife stopped him, holding him back. They watched as the boy's whole body was tense. Slowly, his muscles relaxed, and they watched him collapse into their daughter's arms. They could hear him crying as he clung to her. It took them several moments to calm him down, and they learned his name and that he was Mustafa. They asked him what day it was, and when he said Friday before Golden Week, her parents looked at each other. "Izuku, have you been out here for a month?" Miko asked. "I just woke up in a cave today," he said, taking a drink of offered water. "We need to get you down the mountain. We have no phone service here. Your mom is going to want to hear your voice," Shinobu said. Inko Midoriya. For the past month, life had been hell. They had told her that her baby boy was dead. Everything that had happened to her baby. He had died when the truck exploded. But she didn't believe them. Something told her that he wasn't. That he was out there, and she needed to find him. She would walk outside in the middle of the night and start walking, turning this way and that, just wandering where her heart pulled her. She had been missing for a week until a woman with purple hair found her. Her name was Lady Nagant. She would come over and keep Inko company and even go with her on the walks. Inko pulled the information of the young woman. She was the last person to see her baby alive. She could feel the guilt, the remorse pouring off of the girl Kaina. Every night, Inko would look for Izuku, and soon, Kiana would be there waiting. Hisashi was in shock. He was in the hospital, being treated for his throat. He had suffered severe damage and would forever have a rasp to his voice, but he didn't care. His baby boy was gone. He joined Inko on her walks when he got home. He recognized Kiana from the fight. He just nodded in her direction. They kept telling them to have a funeral, that it would help bring closure. When the house phone rang, Inko almost didn't answer. When she did, her scream echoed throughout the house. Kiana and Hisashi came running in to find her crying on the floor. He's alive, he's alive." She held the phone tight. As they got closer, they heard a voice they had only heard in their dreams nightmares. "Mommy, I am okay. I want to come home." Inko and Hisashi had never been on a longer plane ride or drive than they were now. After the phone call from their believed to be dead son, they were in no position to talk. Thanks to her training, Kaina immediately got on the phone and asked Izuku what color her hair was. When he answered correctly, she asked where he was. He passed the phone to Mr. Shinobu Yanagi, who sounded nervous as he explained they found Izuku while camping on Mt. Yakiyama. He was found hungry, dirty, and in his underwear. They immediately took him back to camp, fed him, got him something to wear, and came down the mountain, where they got cell service and called the phone number he told them. "You did a wonderful job, Mr. Yanagi. I need you to take him to the nearest ranger station. He has been missing for over a month. My name is Kaina. It may be hard, but please do your best to keep him calm so he doesn't go into shock. I am departing with his parents now. Notify me what ranger station you are at. Tell them to call their supervisor and give the code HRTNGSIN56. She heard the man repeat the code and someone else writing it down. They read it back, and then he reread it to confirm. "Very good, Mr. Yanagi. Since I know this is your cell phone, I am going to send you message with my number. You call it immediately. If anything happens, or if you have any troubles, do you understand me?" "Why, yes, ma'am," he replied. The line disconnected. The Inagis loaded the car and did as they were asked. Once they reached the ranger station, the parents went inside to talk to the ranger, while Izuku, who was wrapped in a blanket, sat in the back, huddled next to Riko. The girl's even tone and gentle nature seemed to help in keeping him calm. He was much better after hearing his mom's voice, but he was still freaked out about where he was, what had happened, and how he couldn't remember anything. It had been 1 whole month that he couldn't remember. The ranger was concerned, but not to the level that the Inagis believed he should be. Once he finally did call his supervisor and gave the code, they watched the almost dismissive look on his face fade, till the man was as white as a ghost. His hands were trembling when he asked where the boy was. "Is he dangerous?" Miko asked, wondering what caused such a change in the man's demeanor. I don't believe so, ma'am. But he is a high-value target, being looked for by the HSC, the JDF, and the National Police," the ranger gulped. "We read about this thing in training, but I never." "The boy is frightened and afraid. If you don't calm down, you are going to make this even worse," Miko said sternly. Shinobu, her husband, just nodded. "I am going to get him out of the car, and we will stay with him until his parents arrive. You must keep calm and ensure whoever shows up is also calm. If the poor boy has been missing for a month, who knows what horrors he has had to endure that his mind has blocked them out." The ranger nodded. Military Base Epsilon. General Thunderbolt was sitting in his hospital bed, the presence of his granddaughter Yui somewhat alleviating his typically sour disposition. She was quiet and didn't feel the need to talk about nonsense, a fact that worried her parents, but made her just right. As he was still recovering from the giant green ape, he had been in an increasingly sour mood, especially with the loss of a whole airborne division. Thankfully, none of the people under his command had died. But then, somehow, this huge brute had managed to escape and disappear. Lack of progress when he gave an order was an excellent way to get his dander up. He had put off his daughter coming to visit as long as he could till, in the midst of trying to stall them once again, Yui got on the phone. "Grandpa, I am coming to see you." The older man chuckled. It was not a request, not a question. She was giving him a statement. His daughter had come in and fussed over him. Thankfully, her husband was a good man who just asked some basic questions before letting the girls do their thing. Yui asked if he was going to get better, and if he was going to catch whoever put him in the hospital. When he answered yes to both, the little girl smiled, climbed into the bed beside him, pulled out her book, and sat quietly reading to herself. He loved his family, though his daughter did fuss a lot more than he liked. His granddaughter would make a fine military general one day. When she showed him her quirk, he lit up like a Christmas tree. This girl could carry a whole armored division in her pocket, now as long as she didn't do something silly like become one of those costumed heroes running around like a chicken without its head half the time. His little Yui had fallen asleep, and her parents had gone to get food when one of his aides came. She was a level-headed woman most of the time, but she seemed to melt whenever a child was around. She regained her senses once she got it out of her system quietly, and the general threatened to demote her and send her to the Naval Division. "Sir, the Midoriya boy has been found. The boy that was believed to be dead when the truck exploded carrying all the gamma items." His bushy mustache twitched. "We need to know where he has been, what happened, and how he survived." According to his file, he had some minor collection quirk. His aide nodded. "Nothing that would account for his survival." "Who do we have in the area?" "Lieutenant Talbot, sir." Good. He smiled. "Get him on the horn, and have him go pick up the boy, so we can get some answers before that damn hero commission get their hands on him." "Yes, sir." She snapped a crisp salute and exited the room. Ranger Station MY 254. Soga Kame was by nature a quiet person. They loved nature, and they enjoyed their job as, for the most part, it was quiet. Today was not one of those days when Yanagi had walked into his station. He was expecting the usual tourist camper information, not that they had found some child on the mountain. When he called his supervisor at their insistence, he was not ready for the reaction his supervisor gave, or the way his computer suddenly lit up with alerts going out all across the network. The Yanagis brought the boy into the station. He was dirty and very nervous. The Yanagi's daughter held his hand and kept talking to him. Mr. Yanagi helped the boy to the restroom and shower to get cleaned up. Mrs. Yanagi rustled up some clothes from the lost and found, while Ranger was able to provide an oversized t-shirt, but at least it was clean. He looked much better as he sat with the little girl, nibbling on a protein bar while they looked at something on her phone. It was this way till a few other rangers showed up. They were worried that there was someone else lost on the mountain or a possible kidnapper on the loose. As they tried to get some answers from Izuku, all they did was succeed in making him cry from their harsh tones. Mrs. Yanagi stepped in and acted as a mediator. All he could tell them was that he was in a truck. The hero lady had been yanked out, and then he was in the cave. They tried to press for answers, but got tears and a reprimand from Mrs. Yanagi. As more rangers showed up, even a few local heroes specialized in forest search and rescue. Thankfully, the heroes were much better equipped to handle things. A woman with brown hair and amber eyes came into the station and immediately took control. She introduced herself to the parents and the children. Her name was Terra. Her quirk had to do with earth manipulation, but she also came with new clothes and some sweets. The kind woman even had some underwear. She squatted with Izuku and gently asked him some questions with a patient smile, taking all his answers. She then turned to Yanagi and the ranger and went over where their campsite was and where they encountered Izuku. She listened to Izuku talk about the cave and then approached the sun. She smiled, thanked him and Ryuko for being so helpful, and quickly exited. She called people together, and they left, taking some of the chaos with them. Chaos. The heroes and other rangers had just left when a military vehicle pulled up with a few other cars in tow. The sound of helicopters could be heard coming closer. The first vehicle, a jeep, the man who appeared to be in charge stepped out, issued some orders, and came barging into the ranger station. "I am Lieutenant Talbot, and I am in charge as of now." His voice boomed throughout the station. "Are you the ranger in charge of this installation?" Ranger stepped forward. "Yes, sir. I was the one that called this in. A search party has already been dispatched to see if they could locate the area the boy awoke in." "Good. Give that information to Sergeant Bantham outside." "Where is the boy?" the lieutenant asked, but he was already staring at him. When the ranger confirmed Izuku's identity, the lieutenant nodded and walked right over to the children, only to be intercepted by Emiko, who got in his way. Shinobu went to a corner and called Kaina. After some brief introductions, he tried to step past Emiko, but she calmly got in his way. "Sir, as of right now, until this young man's family arrives, I am his guardian. I will not hand him over to you just because you state your name and rank, as if that gives you a free pass." Lieutenant Talbot glared at the woman behind his mirrored sunglasses. "Mrs. Yanagi." "Mrs. Yanagi, I am under strict orders to take this boy into custody for questioning simply," he replied, his voice falsely sweet. "That is all. He has been missing for a month, and we need to know if he has any answers in regards to a confidential matter. If you would be so kind as to step aside." He moved to the right. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face when she slid in front of him. "Lieutenant, I am afraid I can allow no such thing to occur," she said calmly. "It would be a violation of his rights and those of his parents to allow you to question him without one of them present. If you were to confer with the ranger, you find out that the boy does not remember anything of the past month. He remembers being in the truck, then awakening in a cave." "Well, that seems convenient," he said. Are you a lawyer of some sort, ma'am? Why, yes, I am a civil rights lawyer. Emiko smiled as she handed over her business card. So you can understand that I will defend this child's rights with any means at my disposal until such time his parents come to relieve me of my duties and take their son back into their custody. Talbot sighed. He hated lawyers almost as much as he hated people impeding him from doing his job. He removed his sunglasses and activated his quirk command. Step aside and be quiet. Emiko stiffened and did as ordered. Shinobu, relaying information, immediately came to his wife's defense. Be still and be quiet. The children started to panic as they saw the two adults standing completely still. Ryuko called for her mother and father, and when they did not respond, she glared at the man. What have you done with them? Ryuko stood in front of Izuku with her arms spread. You will not take Izuku. Talbot sighed. Little girl, that boy is coming with me. He stepped forward and shoved Ryuko to the side, sending her toppling over. She cried out in pain. Izuku tried to move to her side, but was grabbed roughly by the arm. You are not going anywhere, Talbot growled as he hated children. Izuku called out that Talbot was hurting him. Ryuko tried to pull Izuku to her with her quirk, snatching him right out of Talbot's grasp. When she grabbed onto him, he returned the gesture. Frantically, they clung to each other as the adult tried to tear them apart. His hand slipped, and he ended up striking Ryuko, who started to cry, but it succeeded in breaking the grip. He yanked Izuku behind him. Stupid child, he muttered to the crying Ryuko. You hurt her, Talbot heard Izuku stammer. You hurt Ryuko. Suddenly, the boy seemed to burst from his grip, and when he screamed the second time, it was guttural, louder. Talbot whirled around and saw the boy increasing in size, his skin turning green. He wasn't sure if it was a roar or a scream of pain coming from this thing that was the scared little boy. The roar of the beast alerted the soldiers outside that something was amiss. The door flung open as the ranger and the sergeant he had been speaking with came flanked by two soldiers. The military men immediately drew their weapons. Talbot activated his quirk one more time. Stop, he bellowed. He saw the green monster, hesitating but not stopping. It turned to him, its massive hand grabbing him around the waist. Shots rang out from one of the soldiers. The sergeant ordered them to cease fire, and Ryuko screamed in terror. The green monster threw Talbot into his men as Ranger came dived for cover. The beast roared, drowning out all the other sounds. Ryuko covered her ears, and she felt herself being lifted. She looked, and the monster had raised her from the ground, holding her protectively to its chest. The Anagis could suddenly move again. As Emiko yelled and tried to float her daughter out of the monster's grasp, the thing growled and broke through the back of the station, taking off into the forest with Ryuko. Ryuko. She tried to push the beast away, but it did nothing. She tried to pull herself free. She felt the thing's hands tense, but again, she went nowhere. It took her a moment to realize that despite the fact they were tearing through the trees, the thing had her almost cocooned, holding her so protectively. She felt the thing leap into the air. She let out a shriek at the suddenness of it. As the momentary feeling of weightlessness peaked, followed by the sudden sensation of falling, it made her scream again. As they landed, she felt the vibration of the impact. But she was not jostled in the slightest. Besides, she thought of them taking flight. She didn't scream this time when they landed. She suddenly heard yelling and screams, the sounds of cars and horns. She turned twisted and was able to catch a glimpse. They were standing in the middle of a highway. Lady Nagant. They were speeding along the highway when suddenly, a loud commotion and tires were squealing as everyone slammed onto their brakes simultaneously. Kaina swerved to the side, getting them out of the chaos. She managed to safely bring them to a stop. What is going on? Hisashi said from the back seat where he was with Inko. Are both of you all right? I'm okay, Inko responded, looking around. Kaina got out of the car quickly, and that was when they heard it. Kaina and Hisashi had heard it before the monster's roar. "Stay with Inko," she yelled as she took off running up the side of the highway. She pulled her radio. "Overwatch, this is Nagant. I need backup. That green hulking monster from the base is back." As she ran further up, she saw the thing, took its foot, and shoved an 18-wheeler to the side, roaring and swiping at the cars that tried to get too close. She immediately noticed it was carrying something. As it turned and lifted, she saw it cradling a young girl. "Overwatch, we have a hostage situation. The monster has a girl. Be advised, Overwatch, we have a hostage situation." Nagant knew she needed to get this off the highway, to get them somewhere else. But how? She ran forward, creating a bullet. She climbed up on top of a van, her arm morphing into a rifle. She aimed and fired. The shot was wide, intentionally, but the sound made the creature stop and focus on her. She saw it snarl, and then that same look of what Nagant swore was recognition. She slid out of the van and started to walk forward, creating another bullet and loading it just in case. "Hey, big guy," Nagant said as she walked forward. "What do you say we put the girl down?" She saw the monster's arms tighten around the girl more as it growled at her. "Izuku, we can't stay in the middle of the freeway," she heard the little girl shout. Nagant froze Izuku. "No, don't jump over there, take me over there," the girl called out. She saw the girl's little hand pointing off the highway towards the trees. "Please, the freeway scares me. I am scared," she saw the beast grunt and glare at Nagant and the drivers. It started walking towards the trees and getting off the highway. Nagant gave chase, running parallel with the creature, her mind racing. They kept moving till they came into a clearing. "You need to put me down now," she heard the girl say. The creature grunted back. "The bad man is gone. Okay, I am okay." She saw the thing shift, so the girl was kneeling in its massive hands, looking it dead in the face. Nagant began slowly raising her arm, but saw the thing's eyes immediately dart to her. Nagant froze, released the bullet, and turned her arm back to normal. "You are telling me that thing is Izuku Midoriya?" Nagant yelled. "Yes," the girl responded. "Hey, big guy," Nagant said again, walking forward, her arms in the air. "Remember me from the truck go beyond?" She saw that look of recognition again. "You need to put me down now," the little girl said. The monster shook its head like a petulant child. "I am safe. See, there is a hero here." She pointed to Nagant. "You said she was the hero who came to save you." The thing again grunted and shook its head. "She came back to save you." "Yeah, I came to save you. I have your parents, your mom and dad." The head jerked up at that statement. "See it okay now," the little girl said. Nagant was shocked at how calm this girl was. She began to think she had an ice quirk or something. "I am safe. You are safe." The thing tried to look away from her, but she put his hand on his cheek and pulled him back to look at her. "You are safe now." Nagant watched as this little girl pressed her forehead to this monster and started to whisper that same statement repeatedly. She saw the eyes closed like in a trance, and they began shrinking and getting smaller. The muscles shrunk, and the skin went back to a typical hue. There in the clearing was Izuku Midoriya, cradled by the bravest little girl she had ever seen. The little girl rocked, gently telling Izuku that he was safe. "Overwatch, the Hulk is down. The situation has been resolved. I need immediate assistance," she radioed in. She slowly walked forward as Izuku's eyes fluttered open. "What happened?" he muttered. "I don't know," Ryoko said. "But the hero is here." Izuku looked past her and saw Nagant. He smiled sweetly at her, and his eyes sparkled. For the first time, she felt like a hero. She was this boy's hero. "I knew you would save me," he said softly as his eyes closed, and he drifted off to sleep. Can you say clusterfuck? Heroes, emergency services, HSC agents, the JDF, and 2 worried parents. Trying to keep Inko away would have been akin to a suicide mission. Hisashi fell to his knees and began to sob when he saw his son. Izuku woke up in his mother's embrace. He smiled at her before he nuzzled in and fell back asleep. Inko just cradled him to her tears falling silently. Ryuko sat and waited. It wasn't long before her parents arrived. They had a curious look of relief, worry, and anger when they stepped out of the vehicle. Ryuko ran towards them, and the group hugged. Inevitably, it became questions of jurisdiction. The monster had attacked military personnel when it first manifested, but Nagant argued that it was provoked. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Ryuko's mom talking to Inko, who nodded, and the woman walked over. "I am Emiko Yanagi, mother of Ryuko and the lawyer for the Midoriya," the woman said, commanding everyone's attention. "First, I would like to press charges against Lieutenant Glenn Talbot for illegal use of a quirk, assault and battery of 2 minors, false imprisonment, and attempted kidnapping." Everyone was frozen. "I believe you, Lady Nagant, as a member of the Hero Commission, have the authority to file charges on my families and clients." The Midoriyas would also like to agree to surrender to Lady Nagant and the HSC, as long as Lady Nagant agrees to take my clients in personally. Nagant passed Emiko to Inko, still holding Izuku, and saw Inko mouth the words, "I trust you." Nagant turned back to the agency's representatives. "Major Brackies, we will be filing charges against Lieutenant Glenn Talbot and taking Izuku Midoriya into custody, as this seems to be some quirk reaction. We will reach out if we need any assistance," Nagant said as she turned and walked away. She took a deep breath and exhaled. She felt good coming to the aid of the Midoriyas. "I'm going to need you and your family to give a full statement," she said to Emiko. "I would also like to have your daughter near when he wakes up, as we don't know what triggers his transformation. But that girl was as cool as a cucumber." "Of course, Lady Nagant. Ryuko has a very strong protective instinct, and she immediately connected with Izuku when we first found him. I believe he transformed because that man had hurt her. He wanted to protect her," Miko replied. "He has been terrified since we found him. I think it is a good idea for now. She has been asking if he is a light this entire time. She is a good girl with a bright future. Let me introduce you to his mother. Please forgive her if she doesn't put him down. People kept telling her that he was dead for the past month. She never believed them," Nagant said as they approached. "That is because she is a mother," Miko said with a smile. The introduction was brief, as they were loaded into a van and taken to the HSC facility in the area. Nagant explained that this would only be a temporary placement to the Midoriya, and that, due to what she believed to be Izuku's quirk, they would be moving to the main building in Tokyo. "What is going to happen to my son?" Hisashi said. "I don't know, Hisashi," Nagant said honestly. "I am hoping and praying that the only reason he didn't have any control is due to the nature of his quirk manifesting and the desperate situation of his first awakening. We must figure it out and get it under control." She saw the worried looks the Midoriya gave each other. "This isn't going to be easy." "I am sorry, Inko, but this will take time," Nagant told them. "I have my baby back. That is what is important. And thank you so much, Miko, Shinobu, and especially you, Ryuko," Inko said. The little girl looked shocked. "Kaina told me how much you helped my baby." Ryuko blushed. "He is my friend, and friends help each other. I hope you will continue to be his friend. He will need all the help. All the support we can give him," he said. Murmur of support filled the van. Hisashi placed his arm around Inko. They looked down at their sleeping boy. The road stretched out endlessly before them. It was a long road. They didn't know where it would end. They just knew they would be by their son. They had nearly lost him, and they were not about to let him slip away now.